I too was a victim of Southwest.
She singled me out, came up to me, and asked me if I needed an extra seat.
The customer size must adhere to the policy of one carry-on, one personal item, regardless of the number of seats purchased.
Seems a little unfair to me.
Flying Southwest with the new plus size policy. Girl, wish me luck. Why am I so nervous to fly? I wore my skinniest outfit today.
The conversation surrounding airline seating has taken over my For You page as well as yours. This is seen especially in the wake of Southwest Airlines' changes to its customer of size policy. The previous policy allowed for plus-size customers to be refunded the price of an extra seat so long as the flight is not full, the seats are in the same class, and the request is made within 90 days. All of the above seems to still be in play, but the old policy also allowed customers to switch flights at no cost if the plane was full and receive their ticket upon arrival if some were available. This topic provides arguments coming from many sides, from just lose weight to accessibility concerns to more comfort for everyone to we don't want to pay more for other people's choices. The issue has also overlapped with fat liberation or fat acceptance, a movement that has seen its fair share of controversy over the years. While I may choose polarizing topics to research for this channel, I am not here to pick a side or sway opinion. Instead, you are receiving the result of 2 a.m. overthinking from an ADHD-riddled lady who hates being wrong. Thus, to have any opinion on this topic, I will need to look into the data myself. That being said, if you are here to see fat people be made fun of, or to be told body weight has no effect on your health, this is not that video. I'm here to answer a simple question. Are the size of airline seats a problem? In a collegiate setting, it is important to minimize the possibility of error to the greatest extent possible. For that reason, I believe it is important to expose my own personal biases, and you are welcome to decide among yourselves how and to what extent these may affect how I've computed my findings. In conclusion, I am going to discuss the ideas supporting and dismissing fat acceptance rhetoric. These will all be important considerations for our airplane problem and align with my own understanding of these issues going into this study. So let's grab our skinny popcorn and lock in for a second. Let's start on the side of fat acceptance. I think it is fair to assume that fat individuals are treated worse in society when compared to straight-sized individuals. By the way, I am using common lingo within these spaces as these are individuals that are driving the conversation. Not all plus-size people are comfortable with the word fat. Please insert the adjective you find least offensive. Back to society. The disparity in size treatment is highly evident when looking in the mukbang and what I eat in a day world. Larger-bodied creators see vastly different comments when compared to smaller-sized creators, even when similar foods are being eaten. Sak Choi, a popular mukbanger on YouTube, receives comments like, Sak Choi is so satisfying, bro. Or, it looks so good. Pause. Am I the only one that cannot stand ASMR videos or videos where people whisper at you? It literally makes my skin itch. Anyway, a popular TikToker, James Bola, saw comments like, do you eat all of this in one sitting? That's weeks worth of calories. Or, it's all fun and games until your heart suddenly stops. Both eating thousands of calories, but receiving rather different responses. Another example is Nikocado Avocado, a man who saw many reaction videos made in response to his weight gain seen over several years. When he posted 2 Steps Ahead, a video where he revealed he had been secretly losing weight behind the scenes, comments left messages like, Nico woke up and literally said, let's prove everyone wrong, and actually did it. What a legend. But it's important to keep in mind that Nikocado's antics and questionable actions during his videos, in my opinion, were a larger problem than his weight gain. The strange demeanor Nick often carried stayed the same despite his reveal. When I was sent this video around the time of its release, I couldn't even watch it as something about him creeped me out.
I am the villain.
I can't. Another example is Amberlynn Reed, who I know has made some questionable choices in her day. However, when her ex posted tea regarding their previous relationship, one of the stories was about Amberlynn being hit by Destiny's mother.
That K-cup holder was sitting on the stairs for us to take upstairs or whatever. My mom came back with it and hit her over the head with it. It was very traumatizing for me, honestly.
Regardless of how you feel about Amberlynn Reed, the violence in this situation was not warranted given Amberlynn's actions. And yet, Destiny laughs while telling the story, and commenters cheer on the mother for hitting Amber. I am not saying that Amberlynn and James are great people and everyone should like them, while Zach and Nick are horrible people and no one should like them. Side note, you know what this picture reminds me of? But I am pointing out the clear irony. Both Nick and Amber are controversial YouTubers, but at the time of Nick's weight loss reveal, it seemed sentiment had completely changed even if his actions hadn't. On the flip side, Zach and James, as far as I know, have had no controversy surrounding them, if you look past the feeder content. Yet both are eating a surplus of food and have different audience reactions. By the way, I do not keep up with these people and was forced to listen to hours of stories concerning people I don't care about and the sounds of chewing. So be grateful. Now I know your next argument. You can't support people who don't take care of themselves. While a fat mukbanger may be receiving negative comments, the skinny one is obviously taking care of themselves and couldn't possibly be promoting unhealthy eating habits or disorders. Amberlynn has lied to her audience so many times that we just don't like her. Nick is actually a genius for his social experiment.
They're the same picture.
But here's the thing. According to Schwartz et al., 40% of Americans will be willing to give up a year of their life to avoid being fat. 15% would give up 10 or more years of life. I should also note that while this author has often written about weight bias, they are not fat positive and have many published works relating to addressing the obesity crisis. So, how can it only be about someone's health if many people would disregard the purpose of optimal health, living longer and more comfortably, for being smaller? Boston Medical defines fat phobia as the implicit and explicit bias of overweight individuals that is rooted in a sense of blame and presumed moral failing. The word moral tends to get a lot of pushback, and in all honesty, I do believe it is the wrong word. Even the most blatant bullies wouldn't likely believe the fat person they're harassing is evil or corrupt. Psychology offers two terms that I believe could explain what's happening in these social relationships. One is downward social comparison, a theory where individuals compare themselves to others who are perceived as less than as a way to uplift themselves. Basically, you may not be a supermodel, but at least you're not Tess Holliday. These people have not failed morally, they have failed to fit in society as well as you have. Therefore, no matter where you see your place in society, you take solace in knowing that there are people who are below you. What's important to keep in mind is that people falling in this category have low self-esteem. On the other hand, individuals experiencing dispositional contempt have high self-esteem, so high that they have a tendency to look down on, feel cold toward, and derogate or distance those who violate their standards and values. A good example of this would be the attitude some people have towards the homeless population. There are an abundance of reasons someone can be homeless, including but not limited to escaping abuse, mental health disorders, job loss, and addiction. Taken from someone who's a recovering alcoholic, I certainly did not foresee addiction in my own life the first time I had a drink. With alcohol so prevalent in American society, around 80% of Americans having had an alcoholic drink in their lifetime, addiction could have led to homelessness for any of the 214 million Americans who have tried alcohol before. It's estimated that about 10% of that 214 are actually alcoholics, yet only about 4.3% of working-age Americans are unemployed. The argument here is that even individuals who were perceived as less than may have a similar value set despite their appearance. Yet, some people genuinely feel disgust at the idea of people, quote-unquote, allowing themselves to be homeless, or in this case, allowing themselves to be fat. Whatever psychological term best aligns with your experience of fat phobia, if any, it's important to note that both require another group to remain below yourself. To be clear, I am not saying if you partake in these social practices that you are in fact the morally bad person in this conversation. These are human responses that all people have or will likely experience. I mention these terms as they are important to keep in mind as we go further into our analysis later on. Lastly, I want to talk about the health aspect and how there is some evidence to support fat liberation claims, specifically the claim that weight cannot be controlled. Don't worry, I've got plenty of arguments for the other side coming up, but stay with me. It's been studied that fat individuals have differences in their microgut biome when compared to their non-fat counterparts. About 90% of the human gut bacteria consists of Firmicutes and Bacteroidetes, with the remaining 10% being lesser present bacteria types. Obese individuals have been observed to have greater representation of Firmicutes, as well as less diverse bacteria for the remaining 10% when compared to straight-sized participants. The rise of Ozempic has also started a conversation around food noise, described by Carolyn Fox as a constant mental chatter about food. This is something I, a so-called straight-sized individual, can genuinely say I have never experienced. While other straight-sized people may have claimed they love to eat or are foodies, the idea of constant thoughts surrounding food is one I think many of us would struggle to conceptualize. However, I don't have a reference for that opinion, so take it with a grain of salt. Hormones have also been shown to have a major impact on one's ability to gain or lose weight. This is the reason you often hear about weight gain in relation to menopause or PCOS, neither of which an individual can choose to experience. Pause if you'd like to read. Furthermore, there are medical diseases and disorders that can make weight loss and weight gain difficult, though rare. For example, Prader-Willi syndrome, hypothyroidism, severe Crohn's disease, and exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, to name a few. While weight gain and weight loss are still possible, the argument concerning quality of life must also be considered, if not the greatest consideration. Take valproic acid or Depakote, a mood stabilizer used to treat bipolar disorder and epilepsy. The medication increases appetite and slows metabolism. It's been well studied to have weight gain as a side effect for most prescribed individuals. However, for many patients, the increased weight is worth it for relief of symptoms. Let's keep in mind, bipolar disorder can wreak havoc on a sufferer's life, from risky sexual behaviors to becoming thousands of dollars in debt, to job loss, suffering relationships, and so much more. In that case, this individual may have a better quality of life at a larger size, health risk be damned. Now, am I sounding like a fat liberationist to you?
Everyone should be a fat liberationist.
Well, I am delighted to announce that we, the people, are able to agree and disagree with parts of both sides of an argument. Let's move on to support for the other side, shall we? It is not and should not be argued that excess visceral fat, especially in the abdomen area, has no link to numerous negative health outcomes, including diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and more. While this is not an active issue in the United States, many countries who have universal health care also find more federal funding is needed for those who have higher body fat. For example, a 2010 study found that Australia paid approximately $1,300 more for health care on obese citizens when compared to non-obese citizens. Even in America, where citizens do not pay for the country's health care, excluding those who qualify for assistance, visas can still be denied if an applicant is obese due to perceived likelihood of needing medical assistance and not being able to prove the ability to pay for it. While this may seem harsh to some, there is a genuine argument to be made about the general public having to pay the price for the choices of others. To be abundantly clear, I am very much in support of social programs. They're something we, the workers, pay into and should be able to use as a safety net in the event of an unforeseen medical emergency, job loss, or a natural disaster, to name a few. The issue arises for many when that word unforeseen comes into question. While I've provided several examples of plus-size individuals lacking the ability to choose being smaller or larger, diet and exercise are still overwhelmingly seen as the treatment for excess weight and its comorbidities. Even for individuals who live in a food desert, are disabled, or struggling financially, there are still significant changes one can make to decrease their level of visceral fat. For example, those who are wheelchair-bound can still exercise and play sports. Individuals with narcolepsy are still able to walk in safe environments and perform floor exercises. Frozen vegetables are a great option in food deserts, as well as making meals from home whenever possible. Furthermore, making food from home is always less expensive than eating out. Take it from someone who used to make $40,000 a year and lived alone in a city where the average price of rent was $1,650. While it is important to note that the heritability of obesity is estimated between 40 to 70%, it is not argued that body weight cannot change due to those genetics, or that resulting health concerns are dismissed due to that genetic factor. I'll use myself as an example again here, simply to not attempt to summarize someone else's story and perhaps provide incorrect claims. The National Institute of Health provides that 75% of individuals with substance use disorder will achieve sobriety after 5 to 8 attempts. That means, for most people, the first time attempting to get sober will fail, and about 25% of people will never achieve lasting sobriety. With those numbers, one might say that there's no point in even trying, considering they'd likely fail a few more times anyway, that is, if they ever even manage to get sober long term. While I never chose to be an alcoholic and addiction is closely tied to genetics, it is still my responsibility to manage that addiction, even if there is a possibility of failure. I do not say this to shame anyone who is struggling with weight loss, addiction, money troubles, or anything else that may be looked down upon by others. I cannot stress enough that this channel is not here to bully or degrade, no matter how controversial a topic is. But I will share something I tell myself when I'm stuck drinking Heineken Zero at social outings. We all got our even if it's not fair, it is yours. Deal with it. And by the way, the vast majority of individuals considered obese in the U.S. are still a far cry from my 600-pound life territory. Citation for this later. It can certainly be argued that some conditions, diseases, disorders, and other factors can lead to having excess body weight. However, it is much more difficult to sell the lack of control argument for the largest subset of the population. In addition to well-known morbidities like type 2 diabetes or heart disease, there also exist other issues that result from higher body weight. This includes, but is not limited to, excess pressure on bones and joints, changes in hormones, decreased mental health quality due to a high-fat diet, fertility concerns, decreased libido, and more. All of these problems can certainly exist in smaller-bodied individuals. They are simply observed to have higher risk in larger-bodied individuals. Lastly, we need to discuss research. More importantly, how research becomes universally accepted. Let's look at a video.
Correlation is not causation, and when we say that cardiovascular disease more frequently occurs in fat people, that isn't necessarily because of their weight. Like if I said that bald men were more likely to have cardiovascular disease, that wouldn't mean that giving them Rogaine would stop them from having heart attacks. A causal link hasn't been established between body fat and heart disease. But we do know that being fat has a negative impact on one's ability to receive quality health care. We also know that weight cycling is an independent risk factor for cardiovascular disease, and that fat people who chronically diet are more likely to experience weight cycling. So unless you can establish that adipose tissue is causing heart disease, well, you're really just jumping to a conclusion that you shouldn't be. This is very different from something like smoking, where we have plenty of evidence that inhaling cigarette smoke can cause heart conditions.
Firstly, a perfectly controlled study is non-existent. That being said, obesity is exceptionally well studied, especially when compared to other conditions like endometriosis, which is comically underaddressed. Second, smoking and obesity are considered health risks based on the same rigor of research, both numerous observational and cohort studies. If we are arguing obesity is not causation, smoking would also not be causation. You're not destined for cancer if you smoke the same way you're not destined for heart disease if you're fat. I am not targeting this creator at all. This is just a TikTok I ran across while preparing this video. She is not attacking anyone, so please refrain from attacking her. However, I want to clarify this as it's important. There will always be variables researchers do not consider. In science, it is never appropriate to assume finality or absolute correctness, and professional recommendations will be based on the most current and abundant opinion. With that in mind, while many fat activists have argued that new research supports weight having little to no effect on health outcomes, this is not widely accepted in the medical field. For instance, the obesity paradox described the tendency for individuals over the age of 65 to have lower mortality risk in the overweight category as opposed to the normal weight category. However, in every peer-reviewed journal I could find on the subject, the paradox hasn't been seen in other age groups and requires continued research to eliminate possible confounding variables and statistical biases. Let's say a close-controlled study is released, peer-reviewed, and repeated by other professionals with similar results that concludes with significant evidence that all individuals of any age, ethnicity, diet, etc. have lower mortality rates with a BMI in the overweight category. The reality still remains that there have been more close-controlled, peer-reviewed, repeatable studies that say the opposite. One new study wouldn't erase the findings of so many others. However, this hypothetical would be an argument that weight science is incomplete, which I certainly would agree with. Therefore, even if we aren't close to the absolute conclusion that having higher visceral fat does not equal higher risk, this issue is actively being studied and a more complete look on weight science and its complexities is getting closer every day. This is the understanding and biases I am going in with for this study. If you believe differently and have support for those beliefs or an update to any of my sources, please add them in the comments to keep this video as accurate as possible. There are a few generalizations we have to accept before going into this study. The standardization of common use products will always leave some amount of people out. Standardization should be inclusive, with inclusive in this regard meaning accessible to most of the population it serves. All human beings are owed the right to autonomy and respect. This one is obvious, I know, but I promise it comes into play later on. The optimal solution is usually not the most realistic one. This study is considered a cross-section survey which, by definition, will have lower strength conclusions. I am by no means implying that the results of this study are conclusive. So let's quickly discuss what these things mean. Say you're a little person or a person with dwarfism and you are searching for a home. The average height of kitchen counters are 36 inches or about 91.5 centimeters. If you aren't building your home from scratch, you'd likely need to make adjustments such as stools or added storage to make your home accessible. You may even be able to afford renovating the entire kitchen to fit best with your height. As another example, the average American man is 5'9" or about 175 centimeters. A California king bed, the largest commercial mattress size, is 7 feet long or about 2.1 meters. This would comfortably fit the average male with a foot and 3 inches to spare. However, Shaquille O'Neal at 7'1" would not fit comfortably. In both of these situations, the individual has no control over their height and has to pay more for the adjustments necessary for their comfortability and accessibility. That brings us to the second generalization. Mattresses and kitchens are optimized for most of the population, not the outliers. This allows those items to be made in mass. Is it kind of sucky for Shaq and Danny DeVito? Absolutely. Is it targeted to outcast or discriminate against these individuals? No. 3 is obvious and I should not have to explain. How about 4? Let's say you've been charged with a murder that you have not done. They found a hair belonging to you, an argument has been confirmed by neighbors between you and the victim, and no one is able to supply an alibi for your whereabouts at the time of the crime. Due to this mounting evidence, the judge refuses to release you on bond. It's been a really bad week for you, G. In the optimal world, they know immediately who did the crime or at least that you were not the one who committed it. In the real world, the judge can only go off of what has been presented to them and you came across as violent and dangerous. It is not a perfect system, but it prioritizes public safety the best way it can, given Charles Xavier is not real. Lastly, a cross-sectional survey assesses the prevalence of an outcome in a broad population. The gold standard of experimental research is a randomized control trial, and with enough of those, systematic review. Personally, I don't have the money to pay for a bunch of you to sit in an airplane seat, so we're going to work with what we do have available. As for what is available, I'll be using the data from the examination survey from the National Center for Health Statistics. I'm focusing on America as that is where Southwest operates. I'll be using a study from Wigerman et al. That specifically studies measurements in high body mass individuals. This is because fat can carry itself quite differently from person to person. The higher the available fat, the more diversity in shape we see. My goal is to make this study as representative as possible for those who will be affected by the results. To do this, I will need to create a reusable equation. I assure you this is not a thermodynamics presentation, and the math is pretty simple. First, I'll be taking the largest measurements in the 95th percentile of waist and hip circumferences for men and women. 139.6 centimeters for men, 133.6 centimeters for women, and for hips, 133.8 centimeters for men and 139.7 centimeters for women. I'll only need the largest number of the two, and for reference, this equates to about a size 3XL for men and about a size 3 to 4X for women. I'll take the circumference and divide this by pi to get our diameter. If you haven't noticed, there is a problem. Circumference defines a perfect circle. Humans are not perfectly circular. We're more flat with peaks for our butts and thighs. So sorry to those struggling. Furthermore, fat spreads as we sit down. This is where our anthropometric study comes in. Luckily, it has recorded standing and sitting breaths for larger participants that we can use. Now, a breadth, for those who do not know, is a measurement that determines the maximum horizontal distance across the hips of a person while seated. In other words, this is exactly what we need for our calculations. I am trying to find to what extent the standing breadth of an obese individual increases when they sit down. To do this, I'll take the data from the study, convert it from millimeters to centimeters. We'll start with the ladies. That gives us a 140.6 standing circumference. By the way, in this study, the hip to waist circumference takes the largest of the two per participant. This circumference is divided by pi to get our diameter, which is about 44.75. Our average breadth is 54.52. I'll divide this number by our diameter to find what percentage our diameter is in relation to the observed average. Then I'll walk it back to find how much larger our diameter needs to be to match our breadth. This gives us about 1.22, leaving us with an equation of flyer hip or waist circumference divided by pi multiplied by 1.2182 plus 4 equaling our seat size. The plus 4 represents 2 extra centimeters on each side for optimal comfort. Now I'll do the same for men and get similar results at about 1.2. I would then plug in the highest number between 95th percentile hip and waist circumference measurements for women and men into their respective equation. However, since women have the highest overall number as well as the highest multiplier, there is no need to do men as well. Lastly, I just need to plug the 95th percentile circumference into our equation to get optimal comfort seat size for our largest passengers up to 95% of our population. So 139.7 divided by pi equals about 44.47 multiplied by 1.2182 plus 4 equals 58.1708. To convert this to inches, I'll divide by 2.54 and get an optimal seat size of 22.9018 inches. In other words, for airport seats to accommodate 95% of the population, they would need to have a diameter of about 23 inches. Now, let's look at the actual seat size. Airplane seats range from 16 to 28 inches when all classes are included. Southwest seats are 17 inches to 17.5 inches. We'll take the smaller of the two to start. Plug it into our reverse equation and get a result of about 101.04, meaning for optimal comfort, Southwest is accommodating 25 to 50% of the population. Now, we aren't done. This calculation is for optimal comfort. That doesn't mean you couldn't fit in an airline seat if your hip or waist circumference is higher than 101. For example, the most common U.S. pant size for women is a size 16 or size 18. Now, looking at someone who wears a size 18, I have no doubt this individual would have no problem sitting in an airline seat. So we'll use this as our non-optimal but still comfortable seat size. A size 18 in pants has a circumference of about 120 centimeters. This would accommodate for 75 to 85% of the population. Plugging this into our equation, we would have a sitting breadth of around 20 inches. From there, we'll need a new equation. Dividing our 17-inch plane seat by our assumed breadth of 20 inches, we get a result of 0.849. Divide this by 1 for our multiplier, and we'd have 1.177. Now let's rearrange our equation to find our fit circumference instead of our optimal circumference. We'll take the seat multiplied by 1.177, then multiplied by 2.54 to convert to centimeters. We'll then take minus 4 to no longer assume optimal comfort. Divide this all by our 1.2182 from earlier, which is our observed breadth multiplier, and times this number by pi to reestablish a circumference measurement instead of a diameter. Now you'd be able to plug in other seat sizes to find your fit circumference. Say you're using an Airbus A350, flying with Delta, which has a width of 18 inches. Plug that 18 into our equation, and you'd have a rough fit circumference of around 128.5 centimeters. Okay, now we have our equations. How can we use them to answer our original question? Is there an airline problem? Notice that I generalized standard products should fit most of the population, but I didn't outline what percentage constituted most. I'm leaving this for you all to decide. I do want to mention that there are numerous considerations that are missed in this research. For instance, how often are individuals in the 95th percentile flying? A size 3X is not my 600-pound life territory, but it still may be more likely that individuals of this size experience some amount of pain while traveling. Would this lead to a decrease in flying for these people? If so, that would actually mean airlines are accommodating more of the population than assumed. On the other hand, what if our fit circumference is actually larger than a size 18? Or what if it's smaller? These are questions I do not have the resources to answer, and for that reason, I did not set a percentage measurement for what constitutes most in this regard. I will, however, supply you my opinion. It actually doesn't matter. Hear me out. Airlines are not as profitable as some may assume. The Bureau of Transportation Statistics showed airlines reported a $6 billion profit in 2025 across 25 airlines. Remember, airlines can make a lot of money, but they also spend a lot of money to manage aircraft. Don't even get me started with the current outlook given the Strait of Hormuz crisis. You'll forever be in our hearts, Spirit Airlines. In 2013, the FAA required Boeing to replace its lithium batteries with an estimated cost of $465,000 per plane. Southwest Airlines alone has 809 active airplanes, all 737s. Changing the seat size and likely expanding the plane as a whole to have area for walking would be a massive financial undertaking that these airlines simply don't have the leeway to risk. The best solution currently is still to have larger passengers use 2 seats. Even if the argument is that fat individuals cannot fully control their body size and should have ADA accommodations, I am not saying this, that is not what this video is about. It still would not be practical for the airlines. My personal opinion is that it is not required for airlines to supply that extra seat for free, but it is a really great marketing and customer loyalty choice. The U.S. has 25 scheduled passenger airlines, and about 145 airlines total fly to the U.S. If I was plus size, the customer of size policy would certainly be an incentive to fly with Southwest instead of another airline. Furthermore, the average Southwest flight is filled at about 80% capacity year-round. They aren't necessarily losing money by giving away the seat for free if no one was going to purchase it anyway. Had that person been average size, this seat would have simply been empty. Furthermore, and I believe this is the main point of grievance people should have with Southwest updates, the decision of whether a second seat should be purchased is left to the agent, even if the flyer could fit in the seat and has done so with no complaints from their neighbors. Humans are not quantitative, we rely on our emotions and opinions. One agent could think you're perfectly fine to sit in a seat and another one could think differently. Furthermore, because people hold fat on their body differently, someone who has a larger belly may be perceived as not fitting, while someone with a flat belly and wide hips could go through without problem, despite the fact that the wider individual may actually be the person spilling into their neighbor's seat. This goes back to the obvious third generalization. When you force a plus-size passenger to buy another seat, even if they fit, they are paying money for that seat. Not only that, it's last-minute money, meaning those seat prices are higher. While they may be able to get a refund, they'd be going on the trip hundreds of dollars shorter than they planned. When I go on vacation, I budget around $200 per day on the vacation. So I'd ensure I have at least $1,400 for a week-long vacation. If I pay $400 for an extra seat, I'd be traveling with $400 less dollars, limiting the money I budgeted to enjoy my vacation. Mind you, I am a single woman with no children, a savings account, and parents who love me enough to get me home if necessary. People who make less or are larger, or make less and are larger, should still have the option and the ability to travel. Responsibly, of course, with economy seats, but you get the point. Furthermore, even if someone is on a weight loss journey, that weight wouldn't come off overnight. I certainly don't believe asking these people to stay home until they lose enough weight to ensure all airline agents will not ask them to buy a second seat is a respectful option. Unless you fall into one of the 2 psych terms discussed earlier and expect larger individuals to socially remain below you, I would assume we all agree to this point. All that being said, I have no idea how agents can respectfully decide who can and cannot fit in a seat. My equations are by no means rigorous enough in their creation to apply here. Is it even acceptable to ask someone to supply their hip and waist circumference for an airline seat? Maybe we can go the roller coaster route and have a tester seat. That might be embarrassing, so let's add a curtain for privacy mayhaps. Or Southwest can do it the way every other airline does it. Let people decide how many seats they need, and if it's discovered once they're on the plane that they cannot fit without disturbing their neighbor, move them to another flight, and then have them pay the added fee. It seems pretty simple to me. And it seems Southwest realized the issue as the policy updates have been changed again recently. Passengers can once again enjoy an extra seat day of, even if the flight is full. Hopefully this minimizes the need for agents to push tickets onto flyers. In the perfect world, airlines could afford to alter all their airplanes to have different size seats representative of 95% of the flying population and ensure every flight will have that specific ratio to accommodate all people. This, however, is not realistic. In my opinion, because that's what this is, my opinion, airlines should not be required to change the size of their seats or give an extra seat for free, but it is a nice bonus. Agents should not be in charge of deciding whether a passenger is able to fit into a seat. Instead, this should be decided by the passenger and those sitting next to the passenger. If most of the population is considered more than 50% can fit, there is no airline problem. If most of the population means 90%, then this need is not met. I would love to hear how you guys feel in the comments and any other research you can add to the conversation. As always, my citations will be listed in the credits or the description of the video. I have not decided at the time of writing this script. And please, do not use this video to bully or harass others. Let's keep our eyes on the research, the implications, and the respect we all deserve. I'll see you guys next time. P.S. I am working on my next video, but I've got a lot of articles to find, 2 articles I hope to publish, and a full-time job, so please sit tight.